morning, everybody. I'm Jerry McHugh Jr., President and owner of San Juan Resources for this month's edition of Improving Our San Juan IQ. We're going to be focusing exclusively on the San Juan Basin today. This Thursday, the San Juan will have reached 100 years of commercial activity, and we're going to give a presentation today on that. We are celebrating the 100-year anniversary of the first commercial well in the San Juan Basin at the 2021 San Juan Basin Energy Conference, held on October 28th and 29th. It's going to be at San Juan College in Farmington. They have an energy component to the college there, so that'll be it. The conference's theme will be celebrating our past and looking to the future. So we hope to see many of you there and connect. AAPG, Society of Exploration Geologists, annual meeting. I'm going to put 100 years into 20 minutes, and we're over a bit, so we'll speed it up here. Anyways, petroleum production from the San Juan Basin has consistently outperformed estimates since the basin's inception in the 1920s, to the post-World War II boom, to the conventional Dakota and Mesa Verde and subsequent downspacing, to the volumes of coal bed methane produced from the fruitland. Now it is realized that even greater volumes of both oil and natural gas in the various members of the Mancos Shale. Can we expect production from the San Juan Basin over the next century to exceed that of its first 100 years? This map of the Mancos windows illustrates the various hydrocarbon zones from the dry gas up here in the north to the crude oil in the south. It is staggering to think of the potential for dry gas in the Mancos, given the recent examples from BP. A 2-mile lateral producing 13 million feet of gas per day for 7 months flat. Others were nearly as strong. These laterals produced from Niobrara equivalent reservoir containing in excess of 100 TCF in gas reserves. So when BP bought Nebu in 2016, they knew they had something special as they commenced their Mancos dry gas program. It's right up in here. After all, BP had received much of their drilling and completion information from WPX in the Rosa unit, 7 miles to the southeast, as a half-interest owner. Nebu is a key story for the current gas development of the northern San Juan Basin. Okay. BP staked out 6 2-mile horizontal wells on the west side of Lake Navajo with good access to roads and the ability to pipe water directly to paths. They spent over 6 months on a major scientific study prior to drilling the appraisal well, the Nebu 602 COM number 1H. This research project included major expertise on geology and reservoir modeling, completion designs. If you read their ERTEC paper, they talk a lot about the cluster fracs and getting the right formula for that. The Mancos S2 zone, or silicalcareous, is where they landed their majority of their target, and selected as their target, and it's within the Mancos B section. Notice here in this graph how BP's Nebu wells outperform the WPX Rosa laterals by well over 50%. Note that the handful of Mancos dry gas horizontals, that they produced over 63 BCF to date. This is as of June. As more wells are drilled and completed, companies figure a lot of things out on this asset. So what a gift that we've been given by the pioneers of the Mancos gas shale, who originally drilled these wells and now have left the basin for us. We just find out that there's recently completed Logos Mancos gas well in the Rosa area, producing upwards of 19 million feet of gas per day. Regionally, the Four Corners petroliferous province encompasses virtually all the entire Colorado Plateau physiographic province and southern extension of the Southern Rocky Mountains. The San Juan Basin covers the southeast portion of that and contains a wealth of observable stratigraphy and structural features. It is bordered on the north by the San Juan Mountains. That's where the heating comes on the gas on the north. The Hogback monocline here. On the east, the Nacimiento uplift. On the south, the Zuni uplift, and the Mount Taylor volcanic area. and it's on the west, bordered by the Defiance uplift. Most all the hydrocarbon extraction occurs from the basin's Cretaceous formations. Erosion of the Jurassic Morrison Formation formed an irregular surface over which Dakota sands were deposited and eventually buried by deposition from the Western Interior Seaway in the Western Interior Basin. After the Mancos Seas receded, the Lewis Shale and the Picture Cliff Sandstone was deposited to represent the last episodes of the Interior Seaway. Coal swamps then formed on top of that to create the fruitland, eventually be covered by the robust tertiary deposits of continental quartz, silt, clay, and volcanic ash. Tertiary deposits were heavily blanketed across the basin during the Laramide erosion and mountain building events. Okay, in the early 1900s, there were several non-economic oil and gas drilling ventures in the San Juan Basin, but finally, October 21st, 1921, the first economic and commercial gas well in the San Juan was drilled by a company called the Aztec Oil Syndicate. The well was completed October 21st, 21, with an estimated flow of 10 million cubic feet of gas per day. It's drilled to the Farmington Sandstone, which is 1,000 feet TVD, and it's up on top of the, it's above the fruitland. This well blew out under high pressures. Gas was sold to Aztec, New Mexico, 2 miles to the north. It's fuel for stoves at $2 per month, and lighting, $1 per month. On the heels of the Aztec Syndicate discovery, the Stanlin 130X was drilled at Ute Dome, just adjacent to the San Juan, just to the north side. It initially flowed over 35 million feet of gas per day, and from the Dakota Sandstone, but there was no pipeline. Significant in 1927, the Blanco Mesa Verde field was discovered just south of Bloomfield, and for several decades was known as one of the world's largest gas fields. Shallower Picture Cliffs gas was found at Coots that same year in the same area. So this is one of my favorite pictures here. It's about transportation. Transportation out of the San Juan Basin is key. The first commercial oil well in the San Juan was drilled at the Hogback Field, 20 miles west of Farmington, and initially flowed 375 barrels per day from the Dakota sand. Other small oil fields were also discovered in the 20s, namely the Rattlesnake Field, Pennsylvania, near Shiprock, and the Gramps Price 800-foot Dakota Field at Banded Peaks Ranch near Crumo, Colorado. Gramps oil was transported to the narrow gauge Denver Rio Grande Western Railroad near Chama. Oil was shipped over Cumbres Pass via Gramps tanker cars. You can see these are all the Gramps tanker cars here. And they took it to the Rainbow Refinery in Alamosa, Colorado. While activity began to ebb in the 20s, Southern Union Gas Company facilitated natural gas markets by completing the Coots Canyon, Albuquerque, Santa Fe line in 1930. Notice this spur here, which was not built probably till the early 40s, which took gas over to Los Alamos for the Manhattan Project. Slow activity across the basin, continued development at Blanco Mesa Verde made a significant contribution to the reliability of gas supply, which helped get the interstate line to California built a couple of decades later. In 1947, the Basin Dakota Field was discovered near Huerfano, New Mexico, which would later become the second largest gas field in the San Juan Basin. Post-World War II, a key discovery occurred in February 1949, when Southern Union and Delhi discovered and began producing the Riddle well in the Blanco Mesa Verde field. And this is one of my favorite phrases of the whole presentation today. The mythical pendulum of this basin then swung from an area of doubtful possibilities to that of great potentialities. I didn't write that. It's a really good quote. Other gas zones, namely the Picture Cliffs, soon sprang into significance. From 1949 to 1950, El Paso worked on obtaining approval from the Federal Power Commission for the first pipeline from the San Juan to California, with gas first arriving in California in July 1951. Early 50s was a boom time for majors and numerous independents in the basin. And also by 1955, the Pacific Northwest Pipeline was finished by Pacific Northwest Pipeline Corp. In December 1955, bringing even more markets to the basin. Fast forward to that point from 30 years, and this is a San Juan composite map of El Paso's. Blanco Hub was the main delivery point and still is today, with gas flowing 80% to California and east of California customers, with the other 20% flowing northwest. Nowadays, gas flows from the Rockies down through this way, and so it's changed a lot even since 1985. Along with increased gas activity to accommodate the demand from the newly built El Paso, a second oil drilling boom also started in the early 50s. Keep in mind, all these wells are being drilled through the Dakota, and they're seeing a lot of activity and logs, and they're discovering a lot of things uphole between the Mesa Verde and the Dakota. In 1951, great volumes of oil in the Tostito sandstone were discovered about 25 miles southeast of Blanco, New Mexico. Quite a few Tostito fields were discovered in the 1950s, with Bisti shown here and Horseshoe Gulf being the largest. This slide shows the beginnings of various San Juan fields, oil and gas plants. It's just a great slide because it just shows the various places where oil and gas fields were done, and then you go back to that 1985 map. So in 1952, there was much optimism. And I like this title, San Juan, a new basin of wealth. By 1954, the supply of natural gas had already begun to exceed demand, following the frenzy of gas wells that were completed to feed the El Paso pipeline in California. The Federal Power Commission, which was the predecessor to the FERC, kept natural gas prices regulated at the wellhead. By 1959, both gas and oil were so oversupplied and poorly priced that the San Juan Basin entered a dynamic downturn that lasted until about 1973, at the time of the Arab oil embargo, with a gasoline and worldwide energy shortage. Operators and small independents who persisted during the long downturn were rewarded, and the whole nation suddenly had a drastic need for gas and oil. Some of these independents, I think of Robert Bayless, Greg Marion, Jerome McHugh Sr., Elliot Riggs, Tom Dugan, and Al Greer, among others. The most impactful well to bring major attention to the coal in the San Juan Basin was the infamous Con #1 well, production curve shown here. In 1977, the well comes on at about 100 MCF of gas per day, with water production of over 100 barrels per day. By 1979, it had dewatered and was producing 1 million cubic feet of coal bed methane and inclining. Amoco Production had allocated significant funding to scientific research on coal bed methane in the Cedar Hill area. Dugan also perforated zones in the Fruitland Formation. When he was with Phillips in the 1950s, Tom Dugan and geologist Casey Bowman worked on Fruitland wells on the east end of the basin. They noticed several instances of the Fruitland zones yielding negative decline curves. Fruitland is a PC's source rock. This was the new thinking away from conventional porosity and This was the new thinking away from conventional porosity and permeability metrics. This thought kicked off the concept of what became understood as desorption from coal bed, desorption of hydrocarbons from the rock. It was not known as a reservoir characteristic as it is today. Victor Cliffs sands were developed around Chaco plant in the 1970s, and my dad, Jerome McHugh Sr., drilled many of these leases and had outstanding PC production. And I say, wink, wink, Fruitland. The clay #1 well on the left was operated by McHugh Sr., emblematic of these type of wells. Okay, at the outset, we talked about the San Juan and struggling to get going and the bypass nature of this basin. Well, here's a story of the bypass area involving the Fruitland And this is also a Mancos prospective area as well. Nassau Resources, Jerome McHugh Sr.'s company, started Caracas Canyon in 1988 when the value was zero. Partners were obtained. They drilled the first 65 plus wells starting in 89, and a gathering system was added and installed as there was zero gathering. Nassau gets production up to 9 million feet of gas per day, and by 1999, divested the properties for $19 million. A large independent invests in drilling, completion, new technologies, getting production up to 30 million feet of gas per day, and they divest the property for $225 million in 2014. In the late 1970s, Tom Dugan developed a Gallup Dakota area south of this I called the Good Times. Then in the mid-1980s, drilled up several more Dakota Gallup areas. Due to low pipeline hookup economics, Dugan would build his own gathering system, hooking up a number of wells to the El Paso line. Over time, Dugan secured a lot of HBP acreage in the area and would soon become the Mancos horizontal play. From a long-term view, Dugan thought that these leases would be quite prospective in the deeper Pennsylvania. Proximity to the Pennsylvania paradox in southeast Utah. That was kind of talk around the office. So in 2010, the San Juan came into horizontal focus. Conoco, BP, Williams held the majority of the acreage, but Dugan had accumulated 200,000 HBP acres south of Farmington. 3 suitors were in competition for Dugan's Mancos rights in the oil window. Dugan's extensive log library served as a key resource for the Mancos shale evaluation. And Canada was the winning suitor and agreed to carry Dugan with a significant interest through the tanks on a number of wells. Initial horizontal drilling commenced in 2012 through the Mancos member, Tosito sandstone, right here, noted here on the logs here in this, it's a 12 to 15 foot zone. Original wells were 1 mile laterals at about 4,500 feet TVD. While the Tosito was the focus zone at first, eventually the Mancos B and C were drilled horizontally, became established as more widespread zones, including the upper calcareous unit through the Juan Lopez. Drilling and completion costs initially averaged $7 to $8 million, but through pad drilling and efficiencies, costs got under $4 million. WPX claiming $3.8 million per well in 2018. We understand their costs for mile or mile plus laterals are now between $5 to $5.5 million. Original oil in place numbers, particularly Gallup C, which falls mostly under the basal Niobrara unconformity, and the Mancos silt averages 14 MBO per section per interval and as high as 18 MBO in some areas. Those numbers are very similar to the numbers we see on the east side of the basin. Operators are seeing 10% recoveries of oil in place, original oil in place, when tying back to actual production. This cross-section illustrates the consistency of the various Mancos members across the oil window, from the Dugan Good Times area on the west here, all across to the southern part of the San Juan Basin to the Windruff area. Modern Mancos analyses are akin to the post-World War II geologic successes, when wells drilled to the Dakota gas showed significant Gallup and Mancos zones, like in the 50s, and they resulted in significant oil reserves. So that same thing is happening in the Mancos with all the penetrations we've seen across the San Juan Basin. This slide shows the increase in the Mancos oil and natural gas from all of the Mancos windows. And this is up until June of this year. IP 6 months production. Now the red is the enduring, which is originally started by WPX. They put together an amazing Mancos play. They leveraged their science, knowledge, and expertise from gas exploration projects in the San Juan and Piceance. WPX did a stellar job, found many similarities in these shales, learning, diverting their procedures, and completing best possible wells in each of the areas. WPX has since sold their San Juan oil acreage to Enduring Resources. And in the blue here, you can see the original Encana acreage, which is now operated by DJR. This asset was sold in 2018 from Encana to DJR. There's been a fair amount of turnover in operatorship these past 6 years in the San Juan. In pink, we see the original El Paso gas units plus Conoco assets, which were bought by Hillcorp. In green, on the bottom part here, we see the DJR, former Encana Dugan assets. Enduring operates the yellow former WPX oil properties here. And then Logos buys Northwest gas properties and an Energen on the south there in red. The legacy Amoco, BP, San Juan assets were sold to ICAV, and they're in blue. ICAV's a European renewable company. EOG has developed 4 townships here in the south area with 60 approved APDs. They're in TAN, and then San Juan Resources, we have a Mancos oil project here, 25,000 acres in the oil window and 6,000 acres in the gas window. Showing the large company scale, EOG is awaiting approval on gathering lines to this pad in 21 North 4 West, just south of the Jicarilla. Surfaces, topset, tank batteries, separators are all installed. They've, like I mentioned, over 60 approved locations in the area. This slide is compliments of Hillcorp, and it shows, tells a history of the San Juan Basin, really starting in the 1950s. So I have seen the boom of the 1980s, the low commodities of the 1990s, Fruitland drilling from 1989 to 2000, then the increased drilling activity from 2004 to 2013, which would continue to fill up supply. In 2010, we saw the initial horizontal with improved and advanced technologies come to San Juan Basin. And in 2018 to 2020, we saw the downturn. And now seeing steady recovery 2021 as we start our next 100 years. This graph shows gas cumes by formation for the past 100 years. Note the significant Fruitland coal bed production from the 1980s to present. How do you think the Mancos cumes will look like in this window going forward? So thank you all for listening to my presentation today. I hope I got it within the 20 minutes. I want to thank also the gentlemen who mentored me and have since passed on. That's my dad here, Jerome McHugh Sr., Tom Dugan, and then Jack Warner, who's not pictured here, but many of the slides and maps were from his files. Also want to thank AAPG for giving me the chance to put this whole thing together. It was really a lot of fun. I learned a lot too. Sean Dugan, thanks for the Dugan collection photos. Walter Nelson, geologist, explorationist, for helping me co-write the abstract with figures. And this is on the AAPG site, the San Juan history, San Juan Basin history. Also, Lori Walters, my CFO, right-hand person, who's done fabulous work for me in the company for over 15 years. And finally, Stacy, who supported and encouraged me through these cycles. Stacy, my wife. So it's been a pleasure serving you doing this presentation. Thank you very much. We're going to start off here with Frank. Well, first of all, were there any questions here? Oh, here's one. Someone asked, what are the future horizons for exploitation in the San Juan, and what is the next new thing? Well, this was asked to me at the APG sharing that I had. And whereas, the Pennsylvania could be something that happens in the next 20, 40 years. That's definitely a possibility. I think that there's also horizontal applications for the Mesa Verde to go horizontally more so through there, and for the Dakota, especially where there's Dakota oil zones. I think there's really some good opportunity there. So Frank Seidel has helped me with some of our project planning, and we'll be using Frank and his company to execute our Mancos drilling projects this next year. Frank is a native New Mexican, New Mexico State engineering grad. Frank, welcome. You're a 40-year veteran of this industry, and specifically 30 plus years in San Juan, and your firm Seidel Technologies performs full service oil and gas execution and project management. How did you like the presentation, Frank?
Well, thanks for having me, Jerry. And
yeah.
it was a really good presentation, and you know, it's something that all of us that have been involved in it have a lot of pride in. So you know, it was a really good look back. So yeah, and I can't wait to see what else we're going to do. You know, one thing that I always said in presentations when I was working for Burlington and Farmington was that this basin continues to reinvent itself, and that's what you showed there, continual reinvention. So I'm just excited as what's going to be next.
Well, and talk a little bit about how what your career has been, where you started. Some of your first projects were in the San Juan Basin, but you didn't start there initially, did you?
No, I started actually in West Texas in the Andrews area for Amoco working summers, and then they gave me a full-time job working in the Hobbs district, and we drilled the original wells in Bravo Dome, CO2, when they were doing tertiary recovery. Then we drilled a bunch of, back then there was a tight gas credit, and we drilled a bunch of tight Morrow wells, and a lot of the things they're exploiting right now, we drilled through and knew that they would be something in the future, but that was before horizontal drilling, before fracking and that sort of thing. So my first encounter with the San Juan Basin was Amoco Production Company when I got transferred to Denver, and we were working drilling Mesa Verde, Dakota wells. We were drilling coal bed methane wells, and we were cavitating coal bed methane wells in 1991. So right after that, though, I went to work for Burlington, where Meridian Oil, which turned into Burlington Resources, and we did a lot of the same thing, just lots of it. Burlington Resources was a big fan of economies of scale because, you know, with the up and down of commodity prices, the San Juan Basin can be a marginal basin. So we did everything we could to drive out cost out of the system. So the way you did that was economies of scale, level loading your activity, keeping your vendors in the basin. That's always been a historical issue with the San Juan Basin because like you showed on your graphs, there's a lot of what we call huffing and puffing, ups and downs, boom and bust. So the key for cost control is to keep it consistent, keep the vendors there, keep the muscle memory there. So that's what we've been trying to do in my career for 30 years is, you know, try to keep it going. And you know, a lot of people have contributed to that. A lot of our clients down there, you know, I was fortunate enough to work for Amoco and then went to work for Burlington Resources, spent 6 years at Farmington. And the evolution there was, when I got there, we were air and gas drilling, mostly gas drilling because gas was 25 to 50 cents an MCF. So we would just tap on to the gathering system and use the natural gas to drill with. And that could be interesting. You know, the reason why we did that, because we didn't want to have downhole fires. And then we helped invent nitrogen membranes, and drilled with nitrogen. And so I was fortunate enough to work with Dr. Lyons from New Mexico Tech, and we wrote the air and gas drilling manual in 2001. And so, but I saw air hammer technology. We saw the beginnings of the horizontal drilling technology. But it didn't come on till Samson CDX started doing horizontal coal bed methane wells up near Tiffany, and they were successful. And Samson latched on to that, and the guys at Samson are now at Catamount, and they've continued on with the horizontal coal bed methane. And I worked on their team as a contractor with Samson back in the 2010, 2011. So been fortunate to have worked there for Amoco and Burlington and Sampson and Catamount, and then a lot of the other people that have been, part of those organizations are now running their own companies, like Logos or former Burlington people, and been able to, help them with their projects. And in Canada, we were able to help them early on and brought best practices to other operators. And that's what we look for. We look to be fast followers and not bleeding edge technology, because this basin can still be marginal, and you have to control costs.
Talk about some of the fruitland that's happening now. That's some of the more recent drilling. I didn't really, I touched on it a bit, but I know that Catamount and people up in, especially La Plata County, Colorado, are drilling.
Yeah,
horizontal wells up there.
it's
Talk about
exciting.
that a little bit.
When we in 2015, BP gave us a call and said, "Hey, we're going to keep our acreage," because they talked about selling out of the San Juan Basin. They said, "Well, we're going to keep it. Will you guys help us develop the coal bed methane process for our company? Will you help us with the Mancos well?" So we did. We worked for them for 2 years and trained up their people, and then they, said, "Well, we're good. So see you later." But it was fine. They were wonderful people to work with. And we did some technical limit work and found, said that, we didn't think we could get past 10,000 feet drilling horizontal coal bed methane wells in a 15-foot zone, or 25-foot zone, wherever. It depends on where you're at, and the pressures are all over the place, from virgin reservoir pressure, which is abnormal, 1,600 psi, all the way to 250 psi, depending on how much depletion there's been. But we've been able to help develop the processes and bring in step changes that have enabled us to get up to 14,000 feet measured depth. So and these wells are performing fantastic, in the tens of millions of gas per day. So we're quite pleased with what's been going on. We brought in managed pressure drilling from our experience in other basins, and that's been working real well for Red Willow. And I think some other operators have tried it as well. So again, being a fast follower, we're bringing in whatever technology is working for us elsewhere and seeing if it helps us work, in the San Juan Basin.
What's been the I mean, I see a couple rigs running up there for Catamount or for Red Willow. Are they on a pretty consistent program that they're doing today?
Yeah, they have been, and some of those areas are seasonal because of wildlife restrictions. But we're with the price of natural gas, the price of the oil price. That's what I always say. It's commodity that floats all boats. There's people always talk about the politics, but in my 40 years of experience, it's whatever the commodity price is helping us, to give us momentum to make these marginal projects economic. So luckily, a lot of these companies do have inventory, have permits, and they're able to go drill. So, and then we're having to work with the spacing issues in Colorado, in La Plata County. So it's not easy, but the oil field seems to always find a way.
Do they have to go to hearing for each lateral, or can they get a CA on a certain?
No, you don't have to go to hearing.
Laterals? No,
you don't have to go to hearing for each lateral. There's rules in place. Some of the rules in New Mexico, I actually helped write about the first horizontal drilling rules in New Mexico. It used to be the norm. I don't know if it is anymore, but the New Mexico Oil and Gas Commission would actually come to industry and say, "Would you guys help us write the rules, because your business better than anybody else." So that was refreshing, because it was to protect resources, it was protect the public, and it was to ensure that we were getting all the resources out of the ground and not leave anything behind. So that was quite refreshing and fun to do. So so there's rules in place. You just got to know the rules. You got to work within the rules. There's lots of things. There's lots of pitfalls in the San Juan Basin. There's all the you know quite well, Jerry, all the regulations that are going on there with the state, with the feds. There's also pitfalls in drilling the wells. There's local area expertise from the way that the formations react with different fluids and that sort of thing. And so the key is to drill these wells efficiently and as low cost as possible, and then design them and drill them to make sure that you get the best completion.
Talk about some of the issues that are difficult, machinery, equipment, and water. I know is one of our viewers asked about the water.
Yeah, what's changed a lot in the basin is it's a lot of major services like Halliburton have moved out of the basin. So in the last downturn, and some companies have struggled to stay in business, and staffs across the board in the oil field are reduced. So we work in other places of the world where we have to treat the project as a remote project and make sure that on the logistical side that you have your plan, work your plan, make sure that you have everything you need, get on the list with these vendors, sooner rather than later, make sure that you have all of your equipment and materials in time. The pandemic did cause a lot of damage to our industry. A lot of people left the industry, they were laid off, that sort of thing. And now trying to get them back is difficult, takes time. Tubulars, oil country tubulars, had only 25% of pre-COVID inventory in the United States. So it's been a struggle to get, your casing, tubing, that sort of thing. So, but it's things that we're working around. The economics still look good and people are moving forward with their projects.
And the one-offs are, you just work around those and just count that as getting experience. If programs take off, but the one-offs are going to be a little bit more expensive.
Yeah, the one-offs are the most difficult because it has to absorb all the rig costs, has to absorb, there's no economies of scale. But things need to be tried. We've done that with other clients up in Wyoming, had a lot of great success working around the Cheyenne area, and some of the things we learned in San Juan we've taken up there. Some of the things we learned up there we bring back to San Juan.
We've got a lot of wealth of experience across the Rockies and the West and the world from what we've talked about. Water. I saw a notice to a commercial water well that they were not getting their permit renewed from the state land office. And our operators going to have to drill. Are we going to have to drill our own water wells to have a water supply out there?
Yeah, that's what we've been doing on a fairly regular basis. We actually did some work for a client a couple of years ago, and now they're in the middle of their major development plan. And so you have to do that several years in advance. You have to think about full process economics and full process implementation, because you have to have a place for your oil, gas, and water to go, and then you have to understand where you're going to get your water for your frac job, especially if they're slick water fracs, because they use quite a bit more water. Yeah, and then again, you need to have a place for your water to go, so you need water disposal wells. So they take a bit of time to get approved. And COVID hurt all that too, because all the offices were shut down, right? So.
Well, many companies and corporations operate on Zoom meetings, but somehow the stakeholders in New Mexico didn't have Zoom. They couldn't use it, so that he put them back even further. So people just took off. A lot of the agencies, those sort of places, really got backlogged, at least on the federal side, federal and Indian side, from what I understand. Question here on the Lewis Shale. I know Meridian BR probably had that as one of their targets. What do you see with Lewis Shale? I mean, it's always been kind of the cartoon on a map, the San Juan Basin, that was the formation.
Well, it starts with geology. So whatever the geologist can dream up, we'll try to drill and complete.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there is resource there. I think Burlington proved that, but the cost of CO2 fracking was fairly expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it goes back to economics. If we could find a way, a can opener is what we used to call it. We can find a can opener to open the can, which would be some kind of a step change technology and whatnot, then we can make it work. So yeah, I'm a believer in every stack pay.
There's a lot of resource.
Yeah, if you look through the, every one of those resources probably has some opportunity. Because when I was at Burlington, we did the Mesa Verde infill project where we downsized the Mesa Verde because our reservoir engineers and geologists felt it wasn't being drained, and we made some fantastic Mesa Verde wells. So there's those gaps to be worked within the basin yet.
You also had those I always thought those high angle Mesa Verdes were interesting too, how they weren't horizontals, but they were directionally drilled through the Mesa Verde to increase the pay. You didn't do a whole lot of those, but you did. I know BR Meridian did a number of those.
Well, technology has just evolved in San Juan Basin, from cable tool to steam rigs to nitroglycerin completions to, just on and on and on. So, and the latest now is the latest and greatest is the frac technology that, that all these current operators are bringing to the San Juan Basin to make fantastic wells.
Well, you want to somehow replicate the BP recipe for the Nebu that they had up there,
or enhance it is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. More and more is being learned about the rock mechanics, and that improves the extraction.
We're about at the 2-minute warning here. Anything else you want to? Any other things to add? Working in San Juan, just.
Well, I'm like you. I'm very appreciative of all the people that have mentored me in my 40-year career. Spent a lot of time in the field in the San Juan Basin. It's a beautiful country, beautiful weather, and fantastic projects to work. One that we have, if you ever go down, put on your waders down below the dam, there's the Munoz well that we replaced and made a fishing parking lot down there, but it has an structural rock down there of how we produce gas out of so I enjoy doing that. I enjoy doing the stuff that helps the community and helps our industry. So I think we'll continue to do that. We have a lot of good citizens in the San Juan Basin.
Oh, we have a great backdrop of people in the business, people listening today. I mean, I always encourage people to continue to be advocates. I heard something the other day of a Thanksgiving dinner cheat sheet on what to talk about with the family at Thanksgiving, on how important the energy is, and especially with people who get it in the business. So, I mean, I think that's continually where we have to be. That actually there are real jobs, and that as I was out this morning, it was really cold, and I mean, I always am thankful to get back to a warm house, and most of that is due to hydrocarbons. Everything you see and look at is due to hydrocarbons. So.
You mentioned the other thing that's the next evolution in the San Juan Basin as well. We're working on projects in the rattlesnake field that you mentioned was a Pennsylvania discovery, and now they're finding helium in that field. So there's when people are talking about hydrogen, extracting hydrogen in the San Juan Basin. So the San Juan Basin will continue to reinvent itself.
It sounds like it. So overall question for us to ponder: since 1920, we produced 448 million barrels, 54 TCF of gas. So something for all of us to think about is when do we think that the San Juan will surpass those goals in the next 100 years, those metrics. I mean, I know I've talked to other people about this, and they've done some figuring on the back of an envelope or things like that. But you think we'll have 55 TCF in 50 years, Frank?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I've seen some of the estimates, and if other people start developing their assets, that haven't because of the price of gas, then you'll get more straws into the reservoir, and you'll start seeing those projections becoming real.
When in the oil window, my goodness, that's some estimates have that at 2 to 3 billion barrels of oil.
Well, if completion technology keeps improving, that's what we've seen in other projects that we're working on, that every year we get better and better recoveries.
Mm-hmm. Well, we appreciate having you, Frank. Thanks for your questions. Someone asked about the average gas price break even for wells. I'd say it's probably around $3 for a significant Mancus gas well project, wouldn't you say? I don't know if you've done the economics on that, Frank.
Well, where we're at right now, is solid economics, because what you want is a good return on your investment, or you're not going to invest. So break even is where we're at right now, in my belief, for the gas, because again, you want to get a 20% return on your project. So.
Well, good. Well, appreciate everything, and thanks for taking the time to update us on the state of the San Juan Basin. I know we can probably get into the nitty-gritty further on that, and specific projects which you've worked on and been a great executioner of projects. So our next IQ is going to be the third Tuesday of November, 9 a.m. That's going to be Mountain Standard Time, so make sure you fall back. Our topic is going to be the Western United States natural gas outlook. Heading into winter, what can we expect going forward? Pricing, supply, demand. How does this secure basin fit into the energy mix this winter and going into 2000 or 2022 and beyond? So, I mean, I think.
Thanks for having me today.
Well, thank you, Frank. Yeah, it's been really good. Thank you. Also, thanks to Lori, who's backed me up and produced the presentation today. Lori's been at San Juan for 15 years, and besides the IQ, production handles all of our oil and gas production, finances, and compliance, reporting, and everything. Lori's the greatest. So thanks, Lori. Again, thanks for letting me take the reins on this important milestone for the San Juan, and appreciate all of you who are took time to listen. Well, I think our best is yet to come. So thanks a lot.